equal opportunities in order to ensure that all citizens are educated. This is the only way to move the developing world forward. That is why I have 3 questions for today's debate. On the first question, is aid enough for the developing world? Because their side has constantly talked about how people are starving. But that is exactly why we have to make a change. Because since the status quo already proposes humanitarian aid to solve the problem, we already think that there should be a change where education should be implemented. We already talked about donor fatigue, on how these donors can stop giving aid at the end of the day. We already talked about dependency, where these countries cannot stand by themselves if those developed countries are not giving aid to these developing countries, and which we see that they have ignored. They only talked about starvation, and we see that the problem is about how we have to make sure that there are sustainable human resources, where farmers need to be there, where people who are educated need to be there in order to create jobs. And when there are jobs, that is the only way to solve the problem that they are proposing. So moving on to my second question on, is education important for economic growth? Because their logic is that building factories will create economic development. We don't see any logical link, because people wouldn't even know how to read and write. People can't even work in factories because they don't have the skills to do so. And that is why economic development won't happen, because you're only building buildings. You're not doing anything at all to ensure that these people are going to be educated. But then they talked about how labor jobs are okay. And we see that they're ignoring what labor jobs actually are, because they are low pay, there are low work conditions, and they're pushing the developing world still in poverty. There is going to be a cycle of poverty, because if we let these people have labor jobs, they're still going to have low pay throughout the future. And we see that their future is still going to be where they're going to be in poverty, and they're never really going to have jobs and economic development. So moving on to my third question on who is moving the developing world forward. Because we already talked about self-actualization, on how these people need the skills in order to ensure that they understand ideas and issues in the society. We also talked about how these people and how universal primary education makes sure that there is social equality, where where these citizens need to go to school, because there are girls who can't go to school because of the traditional mindset, which my second speaker already talked about, and they never attacked on that point. We see this is important, because if universal primary education is not implemented, there will be citizens who are not educated. There will be some citizens who will not have the skills and who will not have the ability to read and write. And that is why, at the end of the day, we see that the most important thing is universality, where these people and where all citizens need to be ensured that they are educated, because education is the start of everything. Because education is going to ensure that these people are skilled enough to get jobs in the future, which is efficient economic development. Education is going to ensure that these people are going to become better workers for the country. When they're becoming better workers, we're also having human resources in the country, so we're going to move the developing world forward rather than pushing them in poverty, which is what side proposition is doing. We have to address the issue and make the change with education, because education is going to be the only way to ensure that change is going to be sustainable and development is going to be there. So for all of these reasons, I'm proud to oppose. Thank you.